Standing at the heart of Idaho Falls is Rose Hill Cemetery. Dating back to the late 1800s, this historic cemetery has two parts: the higher levels, where the original Rose Hill Cemetery was, and the lower levels, where it has expanded.
We do have the newer part of the cemetery Rose here, and then we have the older part. The older part is a little concerning because when we go do burials up there, you don't know who's actually buried there. We have books, we keep good records, but people back in the days when they didn't have a lot of money would sneak in here and bury their siblings or their spouses or any relative on another grave that's already been there. So it's a little nerve-wracking when you go up there to find a grave for somebody and actually have to dig one up.
Rose Hill Cemetery gets its fair share of visitors, mostly mourners or people doing research for their family history. However, Rose Hill Cemetery is the home to many urban legends. Some would go as far as to even say that the cemetery itself is haunted. The first and most popular of these stories is the Knocking Grave, where legend has it, if you go to Rose Hill Cemetery and visit a certain crypt, knocking at it at night will cause the spirits of the dead to knock back to you.
The Knocking Grave is kind of an urban legend here. Kids would come in, they'd climb the fences, they would knock on a grave, which actually was just the stone being loose from the concrete, and it would rattle back. So it would seem like the grave was knocking back, and it would scare a lot of people.
Scott later took us to the grave, where, in greater detail, he was able to explain the whole phenomena surrounding the so-called knocking grave.
All right, well, this is the famous knocking grave, and what kids would do they would knock on this, and this stone would be loose, and it would actually rattle back and forth, and it actually really did sound like someone's knocking back on the other side. We're kind of the draw. The kids would want to come in here and just get a little spooked late at night. So, and I guess what they did, they came in and they sealed that off so it doesn't do it anymore.
The next urban legend on the list was the Werewolf of Rose Hill Cemetery, where allegedly, if you go to a certain spot, there are two graves. One buried with the last name Ware, and the other the last name Wolf.
And I don't know if that was ever done on purpose, but they happen to be side by side, and it spells Ware and Wolf, and those are the last names of the people buried there. It's quite unique, but it's pretty cool just to drive by and see Ware and Wolf.
According to the staff, what would happen is that people would come and stand in the middle of the graves and chant 3 times the word werewolf, expecting a werewolf to appear and then drag them off into the night.
And the werewolf, I knew we would come and we would stand in the middle, and supposedly if you said werewolf or something like that a couple of times, then the werewolf was supposed to come up and grab your legs if you stood in the middle of the grave. But we just had friends in the back behind the trees making noises and scaring everybody, so that was the thing.
After speaking with Jenene some more, she told us about another story, an actual event that happened here at Rose Hill Cemetery. One that, unlike the knocking grave and the werewolf story, was actually pretty unknown, except amongst the staff who had witnessed the woman who came herself.
Well, there is one that I know of. She came in here. She had bought a house from a gentleman, found out in doing research who he was that built the house. And I guess at a certain time in April, things would go wrong in her house. True, it's daylight savings time, but she said, no, this is different because these are all clocks and other things that were going on. And during her research, she found out that the gentleman had died on that day.
The woman in question was looking for information regarding Elmer William Mariotto.
That things would go wrong in her house. And so then she would come here to the cemetery found his grave, found out that he died in April. And then also found out that 2 years later, his wife also died in April, 2 years later. And so she comes in and she just kind of does a little seance and talks to him, and to keep the spirits calm and cool in their home. So she's never seen it, but her grandkids have seen the spirits, she said. And the changes. I guess clocks would change and things would move in her house.
To learn more about paranormal entities and also how to deal with them, we spoke to Adam Anthony, a paranormal Elleviator living in Idaho Falls.
The standard one is sage. You burn the sage. It's a very common one. A lot of people do. Also, getting a blessing from the person who's having a problem from their religious leader. Those two things don't necessarily cure the situation. It basically cures the person. So because they have an affliction physically and mentally and emotionally with the problem that's going on, you can take care of a good chunk of the problem by alleviating the person. So because they feel less influence, they don't feel an influence from whatever's influencing them. So then it just moves on over a course of years. So I've been alleviating paranormal entities for about 6 years. I was investigating for about 2. Through my research, I've learned you can't get rid of a problem. There's a lot of terminology and things that resolve with it, but basically it's ethereal. So on another plane, or for the science people, it's subspace. Only antimatter can destroy matter, and matter can never be destroyed. It can only be repositioned or reconditioned to something else. Same thing goes with that. Because they have energy, they have mass. So you can't necessarily get rid of it. You can only alleviate it to a point or dissipate it to a point to where it has no energy to continue, or it moves on to somewhere else.
And that's just what this woman did. According to Jenene, the woman later contacted a priest and had an exorcism done on the home. From that point on, according to Jenene, the woman had no problems afterwards.
And she had an exorcism come to her home, and so.
Oh, an exorcist actually came to her place?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Wow.
I haven't really talked to her. I've seen her 3 or 4 times, so maybe it's calming down.
Regardless of any threat, whether it be domestic or paranormal, the staff at Rose Hill Cemetery have assured me that they will do everything they can to keep the cemetery in its good order. My name is John Ersick III, and you've been watching Rose Hill Cemetery Urban Legends.